Welcome to the Colonel in Your Corner podcast, hosted by Carl Trueman. Carl is a retired U.S. Army colonel and award-winning personal injury attorney with over 30 years fighting for the people. On the show, Carl speaks with public servants who share with you their service journey. The guests talk about stories of leadership and helping others. And now, here's your host, Carl Trueman.
Today, I've got Larry, the DUI guy, here with me. This is a practice area that I haven't done for many years. I actually started my career as a prosecutor prosecuting DUI cases, but haven't seen one for many years. So I thought Larry Forman here, a local attorney who really does a lot, is well known in the DUI arena. Welcome, Larry, and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in this field.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks for that introduction. I have been doing DUI since 2013. Pretty much right out of law school, I was looking for a job and I didn't find anything I liked. So I just took the plunge, put up a shingle, and started my own.
Well, you've had some tremendous success in representing and defending DUI cases, which when I was a prosecutor, I felt like I never lost a DUI case. What's changed? What is it different that allows you to be so successful in representing these people?
So, there's a common misconception, I think, in the criminal defense world, that we take like these impossible cases where people die and there's these terrible wrecks and then the individual is under the influence and we get them off magically on a technicality. Okay, those cases do exist, but they're so few and far in between. It's just the ones that are the most popularized. The vast majority of DUIs occur within a mile of your home. Sometimes you're not even driving. You are sleeping in the front seat in a parking lot. We get so many officers who are just these days, I don't know, Carl, you probably were a prosecutor at least a couple of years ago. I don't know exactly when.
About 30 years ago.
I wasn't going to call you out. But back then, and it started out in the 1960s with speeding tickets. The government realized, wait a minute, we can make a big buck. These automobiles that are coming on the market more and more people are buying them. We can start charging these people for going over the speed limit. And so they were making bank, making these police officers patrol the streets and stop people for speeding. And then in the 1980s, and back then, by the way, DUIs were happening every day. Nobody really cared. But, you've heard the story. A police officer pulled over your grandfather. He would just be like, there you are again, get in the back of the truck and I'll take you home, kind of thing. Well, with the advent of MADD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and Dads Against Drunk Driving, they have created this stigma, which again is absolutely rightful. I don't think it's wrong. They just took it way too far. And the government has found a way to sink its monetary teeth into, because now you have, $100 speeding ticket or a multi-$1,000 DUI in fines and court costs. Which one are you more apt to go after? And it's the DUI. So it's become a moneymaker. And a lot of these officers are incentivized. They'll never admit that they have quotas. I don't know if they do or they don't. I've heard it both ways. I don't have any confirmation whether or not there are quotas for DUIs, but I can tell you for a fact, and I have heard this on video from police officers in some of my cases where they go, all right, so I think that makes about 7 for me today, and like very excited. I got 7 DUIs today. I don't know. I might get a promotion. They don't say this, but like this is what you envision. They're going to profit in some way, shape, or form because they got so many DUIs in one day. And if they keep that going, and now, police officers are incentivized to fabricate DUIs, and it happens every day, Carl. And we get both types of cases. We get the ones who absolutely did it and just need help getting their hand held while they're going through the process. And we get those that are like, I do not deserve this. I don't know why I got this DUI, and I need your help to fight it.
Talking about the money thing, yes, back even 30 years ago, when I was a prosecutor, at one point I was assigned as with the state DUI task force prosecutor, where my salary was funded and police officers was funded just from this program from DUI arrests. I mean, so yeah, I can see what you mean. Even 30 years ago, that was the case.
Yeah.
Well, you recently had a case about that I read about that, if I recall the facts, that someone hit a house or something.
Yes.
Yeah, tell us about that, if whatever you're allowed to, can say. But that sounds pretty interesting that you were able to successfully represent someone that had a BAC over the limit and those circumstances.
That case was definitely an unusual one. So here are the facts. Our client was driving from his home to the gas station, and right before he got behind the wheel, he had a drink. Cavassier cognac was his drink of choice. And when he drinks, he likes to smoke cigarillos. It's just his fancy. So he took one road to go to the gas station, and then he took another road to get home. Well, on this second road, there's a hill. There's a pretty steep hill on the other side where you can't see, and then he is coming up on a hill himself, and then there's a midpoint where the two hills intersect, right at the top of the hill. Well, there was a car coming in the other direction, and he was driving. And right as the two met at the top, he realized that the vehicle approaching him, he was basically staring at headlights. And he saw his life flash before his eyes. He took evasive maneuvering, escaped potential collision. And as he was rolling on the grass, which he was rolling at a very slow speed, mind you, he was going below 30 miles an hour. And at that point, the grass was slowing him down. The inertia was slowing down. He was decelerating. He made contact with a house. You could see the brick was damaged. So there was sufficient speed it wasn't just like a bump. You could see there was damage to the brick, but it wasn't significant in any way, shape, or form. The fire department even came and went. You could see this on the body camera of the police officer. The fire department came in. There were like 6 firefighters that came out, looked at it. They were like, no big deal. There's nothing of concern here. It's cosmetic. It's not structural, because there are 2 types of damage, as I'm sure you know. There's cosmetic damage and there's structural damage. Cosmetic, as you just patch it up, make it nice and pretty again, call it a day. Structural would mean the building is at risk of collapse, or maybe is now more prone to collapse, and so on and so forth. Obviously, that wasn't the case, because the fire department came, looked at it, 10 minutes later, not even, they left. So in my client, he was scared. He was terrified. He didn't know what to tell these cops, and he lied to them. There's no question. It's on video. At first, they asked him, have you been drinking? No, I have not, And then as they keep pushing him, he's like, yeah, I drank. And he was afraid of admitting of exactly what happened. And he testified. He testified to all of this too. He took the stand. He ended up taking the stand. Well, at the station, he blew a .099. But at the scene, he looked dead sober.
And where is that? What is for people who may not know, what is the legal limit for a BAC, which is blood alcohol content?
I'm sorry. That's a great point, Carl. I forget who our audience is, and I'm not sure. Thank you for asking that. I'll clarify. The legal limit in the Commonwealth of Kentucky and pretty much all other states except for Utah, which recently lowered it to 0.05, is in Kentucky, it's 0.08. It used to be 0.10 back before the Clinton administration, but every year they keep lowering it. I think I remember reading books back in the day where they even had 0.15 as being not entirely unimpaired, or basically like still just you kind of become loosey goosey. Was, I forget the actual definition, but that's exactly what it seemed like. So the standard has been lowered year after year. But today it's 0.08. And at the time of this trial, which was last week, it was 0.08.
So so your client was technically above the limit.
Not technically. He was
I guess
above the legal limit.
was
Yeah,
it?
he blew, but it was 1 hour and 16 minutes after he drove. And this is what a lot of, I think, criminal defense attorneys and even prosecutors don't understand and don't take into account. There's this case called Commonwealth v. Long that says, essentially, the 0.08 or greater, or whatever number you blow, I should say, the breath alcohol content result, your BAC result, cannot come into evidence, or a blood test, same thing, cannot come into evidence unless it's been taken within 2 hours of operation. That does not mean that you are guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, because the time frame, I mean, it might be 10 minutes, it might be 30 minutes, it might be an hour. And the further away you are from driving, the less likely is it that that BAC what is accurate at the time of driving. And because we had evidence that the client just recently consumed, he looked dead sober on camera, the officer was hiding a lot of evidence, because when he conducted the field sobriety test, his camera was angled in such a way as to hide what he later claimed he saw. And then he had the option of giving a PBT, and there was this big deal where
tell us what PBT is.
I'm sorry, here I go again, right? A preliminary breath test. A preliminary breath test is a little device that they can use to do a breath test for you on the scene. And it was him and his buddies, and he's telling them, my PBT is not working. I guess it needs a new battery. And one of them offers on video, this is all on video, he says, I'll go to Walgreens, I'll get you a battery. And then he says, never mind, I have one. So do you have one or do you not have one? And if you have one, why didn't you use it? If you didn't have one, he just offered to bring you one and you just completely ignored him. It was really, really fishy. And then finally, to add the final nail in the coffin.
And all this was on the body cam video?
This is all on body cam, all of it. And to add the final nail in the coffin, right before he takes my client into the cruiser, right as he puts the handcuffs on, he says, I believe that I'm arresting you for suspicion of operating a motor vehicle under the influence. We're going to take you to the station and figure out if that's the case. That is a direct quote from the video verbatim. And that to me says, first of all, the standard for arrest is much lower than beyond a reasonable doubt. As you know, it's probable cause. So not only did the officer did not have reason, he had reasonable doubt at the time of arrest of my client, he basically all but admitted that he did not have probable cause to arrest him in that statement right there. He accidentally, as I like to say it, and I said, I think in my closing argument, I believe, which is on YouTube, by the way, the DUI Guy Plus, you can see all of this that I'm talking about. This is all on YouTube, the cross-examination, the closings. I'm about to post the openings, the jury selection. I'm putting every piece of this trial on the internet as well, as I do with most of my trials. I actually say the officer accidentally spoke the truth, because officers lie on the stand every day. They lie, but every word that comes out of their mouth on that stand is a lie for the most part. And you learn how to deal with it as a criminal defense attorney, because they feel they're impenetrable and almighty, but they're not. And if you put them under a microscope, and this is what I think our criminal defense bar is lacking in some respects, is deals are being made behind closed doors, guilty plea deals, striking deals, whatever. No one actually questions these cops. So what did you do? How did you do it? What procedures did you follow? Did you follow your training? And when you put them under a microscope, they collapse because they didn't follow their training. They didn't do what they're supposed to do. And so, people are like looking at me like, wow, Larry, you're doing some magic. How are you winning all? I'm not doing anything at all. I am just using the skills that we were given and I'm putting them under a microscope. I'm just the only one doing it. That's why everybody's noticing. If more people did it, I'd just be one of the crowd.
Well, I'm sure so many criminal defense lawyers, they see, oh, 0.09, he's over the limit. Let's just cut a deal.
It was a very difficult case. I made it seem like it's easy, but it's the hardest case I've ever tried in my entire career. I went so far, and he will attest to this. I told my client before trial, because I'm a straight up guy. I'm a straight shooter. I'm not here to try and create something that's not there. And if I don't believe in something, I will tell my clients, look, I don't believe in your case, but I'll try it if you want me to.
Mhm.
But in this case, I said, look, man, I think we can win, but this is the hardest case I've ever tried in my career. And he looked at me and he wasn't very happy about that. But I was like, I'll still do it for you because you asked me to. I will do it. I just want you to understand that this is not going to be easy. And I did not want to give him false expectations either. Now, we ended up winning. No question.
And in this case, winning means an acquittal. The jury found him not guilty, right?
The jury found him not guilty under both charges, by the way, because he was charged with operating a motor vehicle with a breath alcohol concentration of 0.08 or greater. And there's a second prong. This is 1A and 1B under Kentucky Revised Statute 189A.010. That's 1A. And 1B is the, as we like to call it, the officer's impressions or the officer's opinion that he was operating a motor vehicle under the influence. And he could have been found guilty under either one, and they acquitted on both,
well,
which is extremely rare.
That's huge. That's huge. Earlier, we were talking, before we came on the start of the podcast, we were talking about who are the typical people that you see? I mean, because sometimes I think maybe there's a perception of someone who gets arrested for a DUI that either they're hardcore drinkers or maybe they were just in a bad situation. They are going through a life experience and just had one too many. Who are most of the types of clients that you see? And just so maybe people can understand maybe where they fall in this to make sure it doesn't happen to them.
Of course. And that is the majority of clients that we represent experience some type of traumatic event, a divorce, a death, they lost their job, they lost their career. I mean, anything that triggers an individual emotionally, because a lot of times we as human beings, as I like to call it, we're just bags of chemicals walking around. We have all these chemicals inside of us. We're just meat bags with chemicals in them at the end of the day. And sometimes something happens to us, we don't control the chemicals that get released, and we're at the mercy of feeling the way that we're feeling because of an event that has been triggered in our lives. And now we're at the mercy of, you may call it God, you may call it biology, you may call it nature, you can call it whatever you want. You're at its mercy. And now you want to cope with it. You want to suppress it. And a lot of times a coping mechanism, or a crutch, as some people call it, is to use alcohol, to use liquor, to imbibe, to numb the pain, to numb this feeling. Well, sometimes, it goes the other way and the feeling is intensified because alcohol will now elevate that emotional state, which is the opposite of what you wanted. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it will numb it, depending. But the problem is you're already, your logical brain starts going to sleep because your emotional brain starts taking over due to this traumatic event. And alcohol is definitely not something that stimulates the logical mind anyway. So now you're adding even more fuel to the fire. And that's when disasters happen. That's when you make poor decisions, potentially. That's when you get behind the wheel. And it's usually people who normally don't do this. This is just a lot of our clients are like, I'm at the wrong place, wrong time, at the wrong event. And just wasn't feeling 100%. And
sounds like most of these people aren't, okay, I'm going to go out and party and get toasted tonight.
Very, very rarely, extremely rarely. Those with the conscious mind of, I'm going to go out, get toasted, and then drive, and then let's see what happens. And if I get caught, I'm going to use a criminal defense attorney, I think are 1% of our client population. And it's probably not an exaggeration. We do have those professional drinkers, but they usually know how to hold their own. and they don't get completely smashed, every other night. They go, they drink, they know where their limit is, even though they're probably drinking and driving illegally, probably. But they think it's a stupid decision. Again, I'm not trying to defend it by any stretch of the imagination, but I know these clients. They come to me, and after doing it for so many years, they finally got caught, and they call us. And we do have alcoholics too. We have people who suffer from alcohol abuse and are addicts, or maybe non-alcohol. We get marijuana DUIs all the time. Individuals who maybe have a medical card from another state, for example, and they use marijuana as medication for pain, for sleep, for whatever, anxiety. And now they're traveling through Kentucky where it's illegal, and now they're being charged with operating a motor vehicle. I've represented people who swear up and down they smoke every single day, and they actually drive better than when they don't smoke, because anxiety is lower, they're more focused. Marijuana has different effects than alcohol. It's pretty much 100% universal at this point, since the study came out by the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration back in, I want to say 2015, where they did a bunch of studies, and they basically found that there is no correlation between marijuana and increased accident risk. That's pretty much all but a fact now that the government has found in their research. Now, when you combine marijuana and alcohol, or alcohol by itself, totally different story. That has a direct correlation from what they found in their simulations. They had like these driving simulations, and people imbibed and then smoked marijuana. When you take marijuana and combine it with alcohol, you have a problem. There's a direct increased correlation with accident risk, or alcohol by itself. But marijuana, they found, they can't say it's safe to drive. They can't say that, because that would be extreme. And I think the studies don't conclusively prove that, but they found no direct correlation between consumption of marijuana to a certain degree. Obviously, if you consume too much, then you do get to that level of impairment. But up to a certain degree, it did not correlate to accident risk.
Well, that's an interesting point that you bring up about marijuana, because it's my understanding that marijuana is not like a blood alcohol content. You can't measure a 0.08 level of cannabis.
Well, you kind of can. Washington did it, or was it Oregon or Washington? I forget. One of those two over there. They're north of California. Need I say more? They're oddballs over there. No, what they did is they set a per se limit. They did they did 5 nanograms. 5 nanograms per milliliter of THC in the blood is considered the per se illegal. So if you're below that, you're basically driving legally, or if you're above that, you're considered to be driving illegally.
So does Kentucky have anything comparable to that?
No, we're zero tolerance.
So does that mean if someone has any marijuana in their system, it's considered driving while impaired? Or how does Kentucky handle that?
So you can be charged, no question. You can be charged for operating a motor vehicle while under the influence of marijuana. The only question is, will you get convicted? And that's where I come in.
So it sounds like most people in this situation, whether it's marijuana or alcohol, are just normal everyday people who just happen to be in a bad situation.
Yep. Nobody ever plans for it, Carl. It's obviously, if you plan for it, you're doing the wrong things in your life, and you need to find a better group of friends. It's people who it's just like you and I, just having a traumatic experience one day, and they're just trying to find a way to cope. They're trying to find a way to deal with it, and they can't find anything. So they turn to, the devil's liquor, or the devil's bush, as they call them. And they think that that's going to help. And sometimes that creates more problems, because their mind is already, in shambles, and now they're adding even more. So it creates a very potentially dangerous scenario. You need a support group. When you're going through that, it's best to just have a support group. And if you do decide, I'm going to go and get smashed at the bar tonight, just bring a friend, just have a ride, let them babysit you, let them nurse you.
Mhm.
Your hangover is going to suck in the morning, but at least you're not going to be in the jail cell with that
Yeah.
hangover.
Better to have the hangover in your own bed.
Exactly.
Well, in all of our lines of work, whether it's personal injury or criminal defense, I mean, one of the first things I know we all want is prevention. How do we
Yes.
keep these from happening? I think you even said if nobody got arrested for DUI anymore, if people quit drinking and put you out of business, you would be fine with that.
I would be ecstatic, Carl. I'm only in this business because there's a need. I always say, if you can put me out of business, because DUIs are a problem, they're a problem of society. So if you can put me out of business, by all means, please do. I will find, I didn't go to DUI law school, Carl. Did you know that?
That's right.
I went to law school and I just decided to specialize in DUI because it is actually, this is a fun fact. I don't know if you knew this. It's actually more difficult to litigate a DUI case than a murder case. Because as much as you might think, forensics are involved in a murder case,
right?
DUI case covers so many, especially with the blood alcohol result or a breath alcohol result. There's just so much chemistry, physics, physiology involved more than any other. There's so many professions need to be brought in basically in one person to understand. And some of the best DUI defense attorneys across the country, by the way, are former engineers who understand the workings of that machine, and chemists and engineers, I should say, because they understand the science behind it, and it's so much easier than the rest of us do, But yeah, if you can put me out of business, I'll just do the next thing. I'll become, I'll do personal injury like you, Carl, which we already started.
There you go. Well, if the unfortunate situation were to happen that, someone did just have one too many and ended up being pulled over, they are over the limit and they end up in that situation, what's your advice to them? How should they handle that situation?
God forbid you ever get pulled over and you feel like maybe you should not have had that second glass of wine. Maybe you're starting to feel it. Maybe you weren't planning on making a poor decision, but it just so happened that it's kicking in. Let's just put it that way.
Sure.
Something is going not according to plan, and now you're in trouble. Very politely. Now, there is no penalty for this, by the way. There is no consequence. They can't get you other than put you in handcuffs. Okay. A lot of people ask me, how do I avoid for the getting those metal cuffs on me? You can't. You absolutely cannot, because it is entirely officers' discretion on the scene whether or not you're going to be placed under arrest, and your liberty will be taken away from you for at least a night. There's no way to stop that. So if the officer has already made up their mind, you're going to jail. You're not talking your way out of it. And actually, the more you talk, the worse it's going to be. So it brings me back to point number one. Refuse the field sobriety tests very politely. When they ask you out of the vehicle, they are designed for failure. Because if you show two clues, and it's very easy, sober people, myself, in a controlled, closed, environment, I have been administered these tests to me in a seminar setting. I have failed them dead sober. Now, maybe it was anxiety of me being on stage and 150 people looking at me. That's also plays into it, maybe. But the bottom line is, dead sober, you can show clues and you won't even realize you're showing clues. So these things by design, without video, especially without video, God forbid, if you're in a jurisdiction where they don't have body cameras, that officer writes in their report, and if you don't have a competent criminal defense attorney, you will lose and you will probably get convicted of it. If you got to have DUIs are one of only 3, I believe, specialties that the American Bar Association actually gives accreditation to attorneys to be classified as a DUI specialist. Now, I'm on the path to try and get that certification myself. It's one of the most difficult tests. You think the bar exam was hard, Carl. Try, this is the bar exam time, to the umpth degree.
Right.
Because it's a specialty on top of everything. Well, anyway, so these tests are designed for failure. And so, number one, refuse the field sobriety tests. Number two, refuse the preliminary breath test. Okay, those two, there's zero consequences. As far as I know, all 50 states, but definitely in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, where I can speak as I'm licensed to practice law here. This is the only place I can actually give legal advice. The legal advice is refuse the field sobriety tests and refuse the preliminary breath test. No consequences for that. Doesn't matter who you are. Now, at the station, okay, because you're still going to get arrested. The cop is going to be like, look, I smell alcohol on you. Let's go.
I'm sure if you decline those, that's guaranteed you're going to jail.
Right, because it's like, prove your innocence to me. No. Okay, well, then you're obviously guilty because you're hiding stuff from me. Like, come on. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen. You're not going to talk your way out of it unless the cop is in a really good mood and you look pretty sober. Very unlikely. So you're going to go to that station, and this is the key. They're going to ask you, will you submit to a breath test? Will you submit to a blood test or whatever they're going to ask? You are not in control. I have so many cases where it's actually mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling because the officer says, blow into this machine for me. I need you to blow. You can't see it on my camera. But blow into this machine for me. It's a cup, but it looks like a straw. You got a straw in it. Blow into this machine for me. And you go, no, I will not blow into that machine. Take my blood, which is way more invasive. It's going to show way more stuff and is considered to be more accurate if done properly, which is true, but nobody does it properly. That's the trick. The problem is the machine, they refuse the machine and then they get marked as a refusal. Well, you have to do what the officer is asking you to do if you choose to do it. Now, here's the key. If you just are not a commercial driver's license operator or a pilot, refuse the machine in Kentucky, refuse to blow. You're going to lose your license. You're going to lose your driving privileges. I guarantee that's the law in Kentucky. Implied consent violation. You lose your license, but it's a small price to pay because if you think you're over the limit, it's better to fight a refusal than it is to fight a number. Because now I can't put that machine on the witness stand and cross-examine it. We have to bring in experts. It's going to cost you thousands of dollars and it's not worth it. So refuse the breath test unless you are a commercial driver's license operator or a pilot, because those two are regulated federally. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration for CDL holders, and the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration for pilots. Those two will suspend your pilot's license or your commercial driving privileges if you refuse. So you don't want to refuse there because you would lose your additional privileges as a pilot and as a CDL driver. Now, if you get convicted, you're still going to lose them. But if you refuse, it's a guaranteed automatic loss with a hearing, which is very difficult to win in my experience. So, but pretty much everybody else, doesn't matter if you're a nurse, a doctor, a lawyer, any other type of professional, CPA, whatever you can think of, there are no penalties separate from a conviction, as far as I know, because we've represented everybody. I never represented a judge. I've never had a judge with a DUI yet. I hope it never comes, but if it does, I think they know who to call. But yeah,
I'm sure it'd take a lot of courage to stand up to a police officer who's probably going to be very pissed off if you don't follow what he says.
And there cops come in all shapes and sizes. Every cop is weaved from a different cloth, no question. But at the end of the day, as long as you're polite, there's no need to be irate. There's no need to raise your voice. Sir, would you come over here and conduct these field sobriety tests for me? Officer, I respectfully refuse to do the test. Oh, are you not going to be obeying my orders? That's not what I said. I just said that I'm not interested in doing these tests. I was told, oh, turn around, you're under arrest. Okay, all right, here you go. Turn around, put your hands behind your back. If he's going to be barking at you, the best response you could possibly have is to be calm, cool, and collected as a cucumber. That's it.
What if the person being arrested says, well, here's Larry, the DUI guy's phone number. I want to call him.
Well, then they're going to let you go because they're going to be like, oh, no, I don't want to deal with this guy. I'm just kidding.
I've got his business card in my pocket. I want to call him right now.
On the back of our cards, Carl, by the way, we outline exactly what your rights are. Now, I don't know if the camera is going to be able to pick it up. It's probably too blurry, but this is our business card.
But in all sincerity, because you hear people, I think there's a misunderstanding. They think, well, I have a right to a phone call. I have a right to call my lawyer. How does that play into that scene in that scenario?
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely. So the two most common questions, they never read me my rights and they never gave me my phone call. So let's start with the rights real quick. Miranda, they really don't have to until you are booked. And if they don't ask you any questions, then they don't have to read you Miranda at all, ever. It's a prophylactic. It's all but on paper these days when it comes to DUI cases, because the Supreme Court already said field sobriety tests are not testimonial in nature, so you can do them, and they're not. Miranda does not have to be advised before you conduct field sobriety tests, and any and all questions asked during a routine traffic stop on the side of the road in a DUI investigation is not subject to Miranda. So literally, it's the DUI Miranda exception. The only time they have to read you Miranda is after they place you in handcuffs and start asking you, where were you tonight? What were you doing? How much have you had to drink? Where were you drinking? All of those statements could be suppressed if you're in handcuffs. Miranda requires two things: custody and interrogation. So you might be they might interrogate the crap out of you on the side of the road, but until you feel you are not free to leave, it doesn't necessarily mean handcuffs. There are arguments you can make. I did not feel free to leave. The cop parked in front of me and there was a cop behind me. I couldn't leave anymore. That would be a classic example of, they boxed me in. I couldn't leave. I didn't feel free to leave. But if it's just on the side of the road, in theory, and this is why you see a lot of these YouTubers, they ask this classic question: officer, am I being detained or am I free to leave? This is how you trigger Miranda. That's the magic question. Am I being detained or am I free to leave? And I love that question, because if the officer says you're free to leave, you're like, okay, see ya, get in the car and leave. I'm not wasting any more time on you, and they can't do anything. But if they say, no, you are being detained, but they don't Mirandize you and they continue to ask questions, well, that's a problem. Now you have custody and you have interrogation. Miranda is absolutely in play. And if it's not been read to you and you did not waive your rights, then statements may be suppressed.
Oh, very interesting. And the phone call, you were going to talk about the phone call.
Oh, the phone call. Sorry. So, and the phone call at the station. So before you submit to a breath test, they're supposed to give you 10 to 15 minutes, no less than 10, no more than 15 minutes to communicate in contact with an attorney. And sometimes cops will be nice. They'll just give you phone privileges and say, hey, here's your phone, call whoever you need to call: mom, dad, sister, brother, employer, whatever you got to do. Mm-hmm. Some cops will be like, I only told you can call a lawyer. What are you doing? Calling your father, or your mother, or your brother, or whatever. But at the end of the day, that time is reserved for you to contact an attorney. And a lot of times with these DUIs, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. So attorneys, we also like our sleep. If you want us to give you quality representation, we got to sleep. Right. So sometimes you won't be able to catch us unless we're out ourselves, maybe, or just hanging out on a Saturday at 2 o'clock in the morning, which is possible. I've taken those calls before. But if you don't get a chance to communicate with an attorney, obviously you won't get the ability to get any type of legal advice at that hour and at night. But hopefully you're watching Carl Trueman's podcast and you already listened to the DUI guy and you know to refuse unless you're CDL or a pilot. But sometimes they don't offer you that 10 to 15 minutes to contact an attorney, and that is considered a statutory violation, which may trigger what's called suppression of evidence. Basically, the government can't use pieces of evidence, such as the breath test, against you in the court of law. But here's a little hint, and this is a problem that we've run into in jurisdictions where they don't have body cameras and they don't have cameras in the jail, or they just don't provide them to us or rewrite them or whatever, is the officer will legitimately, I believe my clients, they'll say, he never read me my implied consent warning about the breath test and me losing my license if I don't blow. He never gave me 10 to 15 minutes to contact an attorney. And I go, all right, let's go. We put the cop on the stand, and lo and behold, all problems are fixed right there. The officer is lying through his teeth, saying he did all of that, and now the whole case goes kaputs, at least on that issue. Officers, just be prepared. Officers will lie about stuff that they're supposed to do because they'll never admit that they made a mistake and didn't do something they were supposed to do. Almost never. I think maybe once I had a cop honestly say that he didn't do something, and we ended up winning that case. Actually, twice. I can think of 2 examples off the top of my head, which goes to show, considering how many cases I've done, I only have 2 in my mind where the officer actually told the truth.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, Larry, this has just been a wealth of knowledge. I think this is great information for everybody out to, whether someone thinks they might be in this situation or not. I think that this is great information. If someone were to need information or how to reach you for a DUI or criminal matter, how can they get a hold of you?
Larry at LarryFormanLaw.com is our email. Forman has no E in it. We're also on YouTube as the DUI Guy Plus. We have 128,000 subscribers, I think, at this point. 128,000. Yeah, we're at 60 million views, 128,000 subscribers. So you can, my contact information is on there too. But our website, FormanAndAssociatesLaw.com. That's our new umbrella website, or 1-844-4 DUI Guy, DUI GUI.
All right. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Look forward to everybody hearing this information.
Thank you, Carl. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Colonel in Your Corner, brought to you by Carl Truman. We hope you enjoyed listening to our guests and their valuable insight. If you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts.